Welcome back to Black Walnut Farm. Willie here. Today's video, we're going to be doing a brake, caliper, and rotor replacement in a 2008 Ford F250 Turbo. So you can see the first process here is getting the hubcap off, which is just plastic. And you can just use a flathead screwdriver to get that off. Now these lug nuts haven't been removed in a long time, so I'm going to be spraying them with some WD-40 just to loosen them up, penetrate in, and as you will see in a minute, they were pretty difficult to get off. So this is, if you haven't taken your tire off in a while, you're definitely going to have to do this. Now I'm using an air impact driver here to remove these, and as you can see, this is time consuming, so I'm going to speed it up just to get through getting these nuts off, as this does take a while. And now that you can see, I've got them all loose, so I'm just taking them off by hand, and then we'll remove the tire. First thing we're going to do is try to remove the brake caliper. This is held on by 4 bolts. The first 2 bolts hold on the part where the brake line screws into. Both these bolts should be very tight. Actually, all 4 of these bolts should be very tight. So this is going to be a challenge to get them undone. The first 2 that are just holding the caliper with the hydraulics, I could get off by hand, as you can see. The brake caliper is 2 parts. The first part that we're getting off right now has the brake line going into it, and is the hydraulic part that squeezes the brake pads. The second part holds the brakes, the actual brake pads in place. So one goes over the other. So right now we're just taking off the part with the hydraulics in it and the brake line that goes into it. You might have difficulty getting this off right now because the hydraulics are probably compressed onto the brake pad. So you can see I'm trying to wiggle it off right here to get this piece off. I'm not going to remove the brake line yet because I don't want brake fluid spilling out all over the place. I'm just going to, after I get this off, I'll tuck it aside and I'll take it off when I'm going to put it onto the new one. Caliper part that actually presses the brake is made out of ceramic on this type, and unfortunately mine had broken, which I think is making this part a little bit more difficult to remove. Brake pads themselves are just held in by 2 clips. So when you take them off, it's good to keep them just so you know which way the new ones go in and which clips to use, as you may be given several in your package. And here you can see the damaged caliper that I'm going to replace. And at this point, I'm just WD-40ing the nut that holds the brake line so that can sink in. And I'm also spraying the 2 bolts that hold the other part of the caliper that holds the brakes. These ones are a little bit more difficult to remove. And again, I'm just setting that part of the caliper aside. The part that is attached to the brake line, as I don't want brake fluid to come squirting out. So here's my first attempt at trying to get these bolts off, and they're in there good because there probably was some Loctite applied to them. Now, since I couldn't remove them with just my socket, I'm going to pull out my breaker bar. The only issue here is space, so I'm going to attempt it with the breaker bar and see if I can, with limited space, be able to pop those nuts so I can get it off. And as you can see here, I do actually break the hold, which is good. So once that original hold is broken, I'll loosen up a little more with the breaker bar, but then you can just use your wrench pretty easily. So here, unfortunately, I can't get the top one to move. I don't have enough room with the breaker bar, so I'm going to use my regular wrench, and I'm going to add a cut bar to that. So I'm still kind of making it a breaker bar, but I'm making it for the space that I have. So I don't get as much leverage on it, but I will get more leverage than I would get just with the ratchet alone. Right here I'm just measuring the bar to see how much I can use. I'm going to cut it so it fits the space. I can get the maximum bar for the space that I have. Now, unfortunately, I still can't get it loose. So I'm going to attempt to just reposition the wheel so maybe I can get a little bit more room and get a little bit more leverage on it. Here you can see I'm just turning the wheel, getting a better location on that nut or that bolt. Next thing you can do is you can bang on the bolt and just to see if you can loosen it up inside. So that's one way without stripping the bolt. Adding a little more WD-40, trying to penetrate it a little bit more. And after trying all that, it still is not budging. So we're going to have to try something else. So what we're going to do is we're going to get our blowtorch out and try to heat up the housing for that bolt and see if we can't expand it a little and crack that seal. But there is a clip with a plastic tube coming down. I think it's for a sensor, and I don't want to heat that up and melt the tube, so I'm going to take that off first. When you're using your blowtorch, you want to take off anything that you think might melt, seals or plastic tubes, clips, anything like that, because that's going to get pretty hot. And here we go with the blowtorch. Now, once again, you don't want to heat the bolt up. You want to heat the housing up, because the housing is going to expand and therefore break the seal on the bolt. If you heat the bolt up, the bolt's just going to get bigger in the space, which really won't do you any good. And there you go. Voila. We broke it. So we broke the seal, not the bolt. So we got it out, which is what we wanted to do. And out comes the second bolt, and the caliper just falls right off. Or the second piece of the caliper that holds the brakes just falls right off. Next thing is the rotor. We can just wiggle this off as it's just held on by the lug nuts in the tire and the caliper. So it won't move until the caliper comes off, but it's just loose. And this one did have some grooves and stuff in it, so we decided just to replace it all. And on slides the new router fairly easily. Just line up the bolts, slide it right into place. Now when I received the calipers, the two parts were put together. So I'm going to take them apart so I can get the one piece on and then get the second piece on. You need to get them apart in order to put the brakes in. So we have to take the part with the hydraulics off in order to slide our brakes in and then put that back on. And that's just two bolts holding it together, so they come apart pretty easily. Those ones were on pretty tight, but other than that, it came apart pretty easily. So again, we're going in reverse order now. We're putting on the part of the caliper that holds the brakes first. The two bolts that hold these, make sure you put some Loctite on those. Very important, because you don't want those to fall out. That'll help, because those tires are going to be bouncing and wiggling and jiggling, and you don't want those bolts to come out and wreck your new brake job. Then we're going to tighten those two bolts up and get them as tight as we can get them by hand. Now I'm just replacing that clip and that rubber piece that went down into a sensor. Now at this point I'm going to move my brake line from the old caliper onto the new one. There are 2 copper washers that you can replace. They do give you 2 new ones, so you should replace those. And that's going to give you your seal. And here you can see the brake line has been removed from the old caliper, and now we're just screwing it back onto the new caliper. If you do like my videos, please like them, hit the like button, or even subscribe. I'm going to be doing lots more to my Ford F250. We do things on the farm, things with woodworking, things with bees. So we're kind of, we just don't do one thing here. Anything I find interesting in my life. And once again, I am not a mechanic, but again, I've just tried to save money and do things myself if I think I can do them, like most people. And of course, if you see I'm doing something wrong, or you see something that you think I can improve on, please let me know in the comments, and that'll help me out greatly. And here we're just tightening up the brake line, making sure it's nice and snug, and so it doesn't leak brake fluid everywhere. Now, before we put that second piece back on, we got to get our brakes in. As you can see, I'm trying to mimic the clips. Make sure the clips are the same as the clips that are on old brake pad, and then I can pop those in. There is a little bit of lube that goes between that clip and the brake pad because it moves back and forth, which usually comes in the kit. Now these clips are all that holds these brake pads into place. Once that caliper is on, though, the second piece, there's really nowhere for them to go. And now the hydraulic part of the brake goes on. Again, this is only held by 2 bolts, so fairly easy to do. Just line them up and screw them down. If you are putting your old hydraulics on, sometimes those hydraulics are pressed out, so sometimes you have to push them back in before you can put them back on. But because these are new, these are already pushed in. And with all bolts, put them in by hand first, because you don't want to get them cross-threaded. You want to make sure they go in nice and easy by hand before you start cranking down with your ratchet. Another thing, if you are putting some grease on, don't get it on the brake pad itself. And try not to touch the brake pad with your fingers. Try to hold it by the sides. Because your grease in that will definitely have an effect on your brakes. And now we're just tightening the rest of that caliper down. Not yet.
Oh.
Ready?
Yep.
Push. So at this part,
Hold it.
You need to bleed the brakes,
Okay,
so you will need somebody else. As you can see, I'm talking
Same thing,
to
ready?
my wife,
Push.
and she's pushing down on the brake while I'm releasing the nut that bleeds the fluid. So you want to keep doing that until there is no air bubbles left.
Okay. Push.
So when I tell her to push, she's pushing down on the brake, which is I'm opening up the nut, and it's squirting out fluid and bubbles.
Okay, let go.
And then before she lets go of the brake, I tighten it back up.
Push.
So no air can go back into the system. And I keep doing that until there's no more bubbles and it's free of bubbles.
One more time. Ready?
Yep.
Push. Okay, let go. Beautiful. Thank you.
That's all?
Now, since I have the tire off, I noticed there was some grease fittings here. So, you know, since you have the tire off, why not grease them up? So I'm just going to clean them up a little bit first, and then I'm going to put the grease gun on and grease up that grease fittings. Now, as you can see with the grease gun, it pops on really easy, but it doesn't pop off so easy. So you actually have to kind of unscrew it a little bit to release the grease gun from the fitting. Once you figure that out, it's pretty easy. And then you tighten it back up to pop it back on. And now that we got everything on and in place, tire goes back on. Nice and easy. It's already been WD-40'd, so this should go on fairly easily. Again, start all your lug nuts by hand so you don't get them cross-threaded. I try to put them down as far as I can, push the tire on before I start tightening with the impact. Also, when you're using the impact gun, you can see I go from one side to the other side. I don't just go in order 1, 2, 3, 4. I go jump from across and then keep doing that. And that's so you get that tire on nice and evenly, that you're not tightening down one side and then the other side is loose. And lastly, because you've been spraying all kinds of oil and stuff, it's good to clean up your tire. There's probably brake dust and all kinds of other junk on it. So now's a good time that you've coated it in oil that you can wipe it down and clean it up. And then we just replace the hub. I just use a little mallet, tap it around till it goes back on. And that's it. Hope you enjoyed.